One, two, three, four, five, six. That's more than half. What's quorum? Nine. I say we have quorum. We can't take this action anyway. Good afternoon. I will call this meeting to order. Meeting of the Tourist Development Council is a budget workshop. So thank you everybody for being here today. Council members, thank you. And so I have an agenda. I call the meeting to order, and first order of business is to ask for public speakers. Is there any public input? So we're not going to take.
Let me ask this.
Yes.
Let me ask this question. Why do we have public forum at the beginning instead of at the end? Just as a matter of interest, because, you know, you hear a lot of things and then you have some comment at the end. But here's what it makes me feel like. We don't really want to hear from you, so tell us what you're interested in, and then it's all over, and then they still comment at the end. Just background.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how it was before I took over as chairman. I don't recall that we did it that way. I put it at the beginning so that if there were members from the community who were interested, or from the public interested in speaking to anything, any agenda item, they could come do it at the beginning. No real reason otherwise.
So I think if there's, I guess, public speakers, 4.6
Yes.
says others. So I think if there are any other organizations that want to request funds or something like that, they could speak during that time.
Yes.
I'd say, I think, is this for anything that's not on the agenda then? In terms of public speaking, or?
Only based on I put it on the agenda based on requests. So I wasn't, at the time I asked this agenda to be sent out, I wasn't aware of who else had possibly made a request. I did know that the Chappie James folks had come to us previously. And so I made sure that there was an opportunity for them and any others who might have made a request.
Okay.
The other ones
Are all,
are
yeah.
return, requesters who had been funded in the past.
Perfect.
All right, so we will move on to the next item on the agenda is update on the TDT financial position from the county OMB or administration or the clerk's office or a combination, whoever would like to update us. So we know where we are to date, please. Ms. McClure, thank you.
Now, Amber, you're not going to be as nasty to us as you were to the county commission, are you?
Good afternoon. So we do not yet have this week's figures, but last week, our June collections for the TDT were $1,917,322. Comparatively speaking to 2019, our collections were $1,276,000, so we are up. Over the prior year, we're anticipating well in excess of our budgeted figures coming in for fiscal year '21, of course. So
But that would include the 5th cent.
that does include the
Right.
5th cent, yes, sir.
So do we know what it would just,
I know Mike was taking a look
divide by
earlier today.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got what you sent out, so.
Hey, Chairman Bear, how are you?
Well, how are you?
I'm doing well. So for the total for June, we had $2.1 million. The exact number was $2,108,109 for June. And as of this morning, we've collected $64,097 for July.
For July.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And those payments are due on the 20th.
Yes, they can, the remittance day is the
Yes.
20th, so if we get them by check, anything like that. And it usually takes a few days to process as well. So it's usually 25th, 26th is when we're really seeing the true number.
Okay, so the 2.1 roughly million is for May's collections remitted in June,
Yes, sir.
and the other is June's remitted in July.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So what was that 2 million number again?
It's $2,108,109. That is what we collected in June for May returns.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions? Just the other item is from Amber, Ms. McClure, do you have the number that the county is planning to budget?
So typically what happens through the budget process is we receive the request or recommendations from outlying boards and take that into consideration as we prepare our budget. Of course, by state statute, we were due to have a budget prepared July 1st. So we do have a budget already penciled in, if you will, in draft form. We have penciled in 15.3 million. I've been in conversation with Darren about that number as well for revenue. We have looked at it 10 different ways. Clerk's office has also taken a look at it as well. And based on our collections right now versus 2019, it seems very reasonable that we would hit 15.3 on all 5 cents.
Okay.
Just to pull his number back into perspective, we've collected out of the 5 cents, 421,000 a cent in the month of June. That compares to 2019 at 319,000 a cent. So by rough calculations, it's about 32% higher than 2019. So
That's awesome.
it seems like 15.3 is absolutely crazy of a number, but
Seems
it's
reasonable.
what's flowing in.
Yeah.
As I tell everyone, though, if we budget at a number that is aggressive, and we all know this, we're business people, and it does not come in, we may not have fun talks later. But if it continues to come in like it is, then we're doing well.
Great,
All right? Thank you.
awesome. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I guess, I think it's, I don't know if we want to take it up now, but I think that not to get ahead of what Darren put out here. But of course, the fourth cent, things like that, I don't believe the requests that are shown are accurate from what's actually been received by our budget department. And so
Right.
just keep that in mind as we go through this, and I think either those outside agencies or Amber can update us on those, but I know that, you know, UWF had the 225, I mean, the 25 was, I think, for the 200th anniversary celebration. So that was dropping back down, and then I believe there's been an additional request from the Naval Aviation Museum, and they're here to talk about it. So,
Okay.
Yeah, to add to that, we do have in excess of $500,000 in requests for fiscal '22.
for that whole, so it's, what's showing is 530, we actually have how much?
Right, so it's not the 430, it's, I want to say it's 525, and I can confirm that.
505.
So what are the collections?
Yes, 525.
What is the collections, the trend this year as opposed to 2019?
So June alone is up 32%. We're significantly higher than 2019 even.
So if we said we're going to have the same expense that we had in 2019, so nobody's budget is cut, how much money would we theoretically have left over because of the increase in collections?
So are you asking from Visit Pensacola's perspective or
I'm
overall?
asking for a fast way to do a budget is, in 2020, we cut Visit Pensacola, everybody else, and if we brought them back to the same level that they were in 2019, how much extra collections would we have because of the present trend?
So millions more is what we would have in collections above 2019 budget. Number one, just because we have a 5th cent now. The file is not
Well,
opening.
the 5th cent is restricted,
Correct.
so
That's
I don't count it.
So, hold on just a moment. This is not opening up for me. So our 2019, and I have it sitting back on the bench. Let me grab the paper from the bench. Hold on just a moment.
Hey, Jim, if I hear you, are you saying you'd maybe even be interested in where the budget for 2020, not actual, but the budget that we created this time in 2019 was 12.65 million.
Well,
So we're
was everybody happy in 2019?
I'm at,
I know they weren't
Yeah.
happy in 2020.
well, but I'm saying what the proposed budget was in 2020. So what it was when we were in 2019, when 2019 was surpassing 2018 numbers, we had a budget of 12.65 million on 4 cents.
No, I don't think so, Robert.
Huh?
I think it was 12.3 was the collection in 2019. The budget,
I'm just going off of
Oh,
something that we did, I mean, this is from when we tried to cut everything last year, is that,
that was pre-audited, though, wasn't it?
huh?
Were those numbers pre-audit?
Yeah, this would have been yes, before the audit of 2019. We had a budget of 12.65 million, and, 7.8 million to the unified budget. just asking if that's what Jim was, I'm saying instead of going back to what 2019 was, I'd rather look at what the proposed budget for 2020 was.
Yeah, I agree.
12.65? I mean, granted, we ended up probably getting to that, but I don't know if we ever made 14 million, but I'm just going off of what this sheet I have here in front of me.
I think we
All I'm
did get
trying to do is
14.
figure out is if we adopt the proposed budget for 2020, for instance, how much money, based on the trend, do we have left over to sprinkle to bridges and flight academies and stuff like that?
So I don't know what number that is that Robert is saying was the spend for 2019. But in my review of the documents, the total spend for that year was $11,584,693 that Darren has put on this sheet. That includes the supplemental budget from 2018's year
Right.
to the unified budget.
So I am going off of something that is not on the sheet that he handed out, which was the budgeted. It was essentially what was approved as the TDT budget for fiscal year 20, which we never came to fruition. So what is the actual 2020 is what we had to, was what we had to cut from this.
Gotcha.
And so it looks like this is based off of a 3.1625 collection per penny. So Amber, what's the expected collection per penny now?
Per penny or for the fiscal year? I have fiscal year in excess of 15 million.
Per penny?
Per penny, we were at 400 and something thousand just last month. So
No, what's our anticipated per penny?
Of 3 million. I think about 3 million.
not quite, just because we started collecting in April for 5th cent.
Well,
Hold on just a second. I can run that number for
it
you.
says budgeted 2021,
right.
7496634, expected 2021, 10,125,000. That's in the fourth and the third and fourth column. Are you looking at that, Amber?
It's
So,
the document that Visit Pensacola
This,
passed.
yeah, this is Visit Pensacola's document. I think it might be helpful to have Darren talk to some of this.
so just real quick, back of napkin calculations.
So this is Darren, but down here we've got African American Naval Aviation Museum. So that ain't Darren's necessarily, is it?
Those are requests that came through to the county, but they're 525,000 this year, not 430,000.
So this is a budget
That's
that Darren put together as a roadmap, I'd say. As what that's their proposed budget for the TDT, or TDC rather. So real quick, it looks like this year's per penny collection is about $90,000 less than what we had budgeted for in fiscal year 20. Is that, so if you take the 15.375 and divide it by 5, it comes out to 3,075,000. What we were budgeting for fiscal year 20 was $3,162,000. So about that $90,000 difference. To put it in Jim's eyes.
So if you were going to decide how much money this board had to budget, how much would that be, Robert?
Let me do the math.
Amber's already reported that they've built a budget around 15.3 million.
Yeah.
That's in pencil right now. And the budget workshops begin July 20th and 21st?
In 2 weeks from today. I would say that if you take out, so I'm not including the ARPA. I think we're going to have a bigger discussion around that based off of some stuff I learned last week. But if you took half of the 3,075,000, which would be the 5th cent, is it exactly 50% of the year? Is it October, November, December, March? Is it more than that? Is it 60%?
So it's. Yeah, fiscal year, October.
So
So it's 5 months this year.
the tax was levied beginning April 1st, but we didn't begin collecting until May.
Okay.
So you've got 5 months this fiscal year of collection.
Yes.
Of remittance you've received, and then 7 the next month to get to the 12
Yeah,
months.
7 in FY '22.
So I still don't understand.
So I would say
If
that-
this is Derek's budget, why are these other agencies in there?
Because he's trying to take a holistic approach, and would be my guess, and help us. Yeah, come on up. I mean, I'll let the chairman tell you to come on up.
Yes,
But,
please come up.
But Jim, to answer your previous question, I'd say we have about 1.2 of additional, I mean, if you kept everything flat off of this, you have about 1.2 to hand back out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. As
Just
Elvis
don't ask me
would
how I
say.
got it. Just don't ask me how I got it.
So that white page that has the numbers on it, what we always try to do is try to reflect the numbers that the county uses and the existing contributions that are out there that we know of, and we don't know of all the requests. So what you see in the middle for the BOCC outside agency allocations are basically what's been done historically and doesn't show any changes going forward. And again, whether they go up or down, we don't see those requests directly. So those numbers aren't reflected in proposed 2022 or even projected 2023. So if I were to go to the next slide, it's pretty small. And that's what we always struggle with, to try to get so much information on the page, but at least the audience can see a little bit about what we're talking to. And proposed 22 is in the highlighted vertical rectangle. And again, it's based on $15.375 million for 2022 TDT receipts, which is what Amber mentioned. And, that's 5 cents. We're looking at what does that mean if we've been collecting 4 cents for so long, so it's sometimes easier to talk about 4 cents. And that was, on 4 cents, it's a $12.3 million budget, okay? Which is basically what we did back in 2019. We collected just over $12.3 million, $12,333,000. So we, trying to be conservative, and we did this kind of back in March and presented in April, we presented a budget similar to what happened in 2019. Now, we know that's what's happened this year. We're budgeted to do 10 million, and yet we're expecting to do closer to $13.5 million. So that's $3.5 million above and beyond what we expected to do in this fiscal year. So if we do 13.5 million on 4 cents this year to budget for, again, based on 12.3 next year, it's a pretty conservative approach. There's still $1 million cushion in regards to what we're doing this year. And there's a lot of nuances this year, compared to what's going to happen go forward to the next 12 months. But we could say this thing happened where we had a hurricane, but we also lost a lot of our lodging inventory to this date. Still have some hotels down on the beach and other places. You could say that there's pent-up demand, but we also have our bridge back and fully completed, hopefully in the first quarter of next year. So we're taking a look at transient business, travel patterns, the success of the airport. There's a lot of positive trends for us to take a look at. These numbers will hold true for next fiscal year.
Let me ask you this, Derek.
Yes.
In the 2022 column, about the 7th number down that's highlighted in yellow, that 1.5 million, where's that coming from?
Yeah, that is the federal money, the American Recovery Plan Act?
Rescue.
Rescue Plan Act, yes, ARPA, which Commissioner Bender had referenced. So these are things we know of, and basically what that is that's money that the county's receiving as part of that plan to replace TDT that we lost. It basically represents $3 million that could be spent over 2 years, fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. How those dollars are allocated or spent, we haven't been part of that discussion. We just wanted to make sure that the TDC was aware that those dollars are meant to replace lost TDT money from 2020, okay? But nothing has been decided or allocated on those
Something that we
dollars.
did last year, really, right, Robert? That 1.5?
No, sir, that's still in progress. That is I'd say the request of, we'll call it this board, to the Board of County Commissioners, that of the 61 million that we get from ARPA, that we allocate 3 million of that to TDC as lost revenue. And the reason I said I want to have a larger discussion on that is because, as I say, this is still a work in progress. We are learning more and more every day what those funds can and cannot be used for through Treasury. And I had ended up going to I was in a conference last week, and this was one of the topics that was discussed. I would say that equivocally across the board, they have said no new brick and mortar can be used on these funds, with the exception of Parks and Recs. The other thing is it can't be used for reserves. And they even went so far as to somewhat, what we said last time is if we put a higher percentage in reserves and use that, the bottom line is they want this money to be used over the next 4 years. And so I think our last discussion of saying, hey, let's put extra money in reserves and then use this to fund it, it might be looked frowned upon by Treasury. And so,
Unless those funds that are put into reserves are the additional funds, the overage that was not budgeted for, that was collected above and beyond anticipated expenses.
I would say that would probably be right. The fact that we've budgeted 9.6 and we're going towards a much larger amount, I think that would be a very good argument. That'd be one I would make. And with all that being said, I'm going to NACO this weekend, and they have a direct line with Treasury where they can get some of these questions answered. I got Amber hooked up with some of their facts and everything else that they've already put up, so we're using that. Depending on how we want to do it, I don't know. I think Darren's just highlighting the fact that we have this money coming in, but it would just know that is heavily restricted in how it's going to be able to be used.
Yeah, and it seems to me that it's on here as just a placeholder because we've been discussing it.
Right.
And the administrator at our last meeting had said that 3 million, 1.5 per year. obviously, if we can't spend it because rules don't work that way, then obviously they don't, but they're not allocated. Looking at the sheet, they're just down, well, they're under that unified budget,
And,
but.
but what I would say though is, as I said, there seems to be a wide berth given to things that are outdoor public spaces, parks and recs. And if there's a way to use those to maybe use some of those funds towards that,
Yeah,
then I think that would be a great opportunity for us to follow the idea of Treasury and that they're getting used, they're improving the facilities, they're whatever, and then maybe you're not having to hold on to some or allocate some of that out of the TDT budget. So it wouldn't necessarily be, I think they would be being spent in the right manner.
okay.
So our original request that we submitted, like I said, back in March, based on what we knew at that time, was asking for 65% of the first 4 cents plus 100% of the 5th cent for the first, really it was rounded up to 6 months, not 7. But it's basically, based on the commitment the Board of County Commissioners had made last year during the budgeting process where 100% of the 5th cent would be allocated to the unified budget for the first 12 months. That was our original request. And since then, I mean, looking at the numbers, looking at ARPA, we've changed that a little bit. So what you see at the bottom of the proposed 2022, just above that highlighted line is the unified TDT allocation request is 10.4 million, and originally what we submitted was 9.582. And part of that is not knowing a few things, like ARPA. Those dollars, when you take a look at that $3 million that was lost, a significant amount of that was dollars that the unified budget had to cut, because 6 months into the fiscal year when that decision had to be made, the other outside agencies and other allocations had been made and couldn't be clawed back. The only agencies that the money could be clawed back from or just basically not paid out was the unified budget. So we were tasked with absorbing a big chunk of that, along with the county. The county cut some of its budget lines too, and the holdback was part of that. So, but it really fell to us to absorb a lot of that. So that's why we have it in there as a talking point. So as far as what you see under the county administration, and we try to use the 1 through 3 cents, the 4 cent, the 5th cent, based on how the county has used that in the past. One of the line items you'll see proposed in 2022 is acknowledging the importance of our beaches and the beach renourishment that has to be done. And in the past, those dollars haven't necessarily been set aside. So that amount's in there. If that wasn't there, it would be added to the project line, and that would put it'd be at $1.3 million. And again, we didn't adjust anything for any other outside agency allocations, but obviously those would be adjusted based on the presentations today and what's recommended on to the Board of County Commissioners and their decisions.
Any other questions or comments for Darren?
Probably, I guess what the other thing I would add is, our goal is to have a budget that we can count on as an organization as we make commitments that reach into the future, whether it's the Sun Belt Basketball Conference, which is a 5-year commitment, other marketing initiatives, because the last thing we want to do is start something and go down a path and then not have the funds to be able to continue to do that. So when we look at the budget, we're like, how do we maintain that level of funding here on out, or plan accordingly whether that money will be there or not. So in the past, there have been some examples of some markets that we've jumped into, whether it's medical tourism or some other niche markets, but we didn't have the funds ongoing, so all of a sudden those programs stopped to a sudden halt. And that's not how we should be spending our dollars. Whatever we start, we want to be able to continue going forward. And I will say that what is an opportunity to help us be in a situation that we experienced in 2020 is there's going to be roughly about $4 million of carryover funds, meaning funds that we'll have collected above and beyond the $10 million budgeted. We're forecasting about 13.5. It'll probably be higher than that, plus you have a 500,000 in the holdback. So there's at least $4 million at the end of this year that's unbudgeted. And our request is to use 65% of that, using those historical distribution percentages to put in an emergency reserve account for the unified budget so that if we ever find ourselves in a situation like we're in 2020, we have dollars that allow us to not wholesale change our staffing or our programming. We're able to continue because our peers up and down the Panhandle were able to because they have those reserves. So putting 65% of that unbudgeted amount into an emergency marketing reserve is what our request is of the TDC to recommend that. So we're really planning for the future. And as far as the other 35%, that's up to the TDC Council and the Board of County Commissioners.
Let me ask you this. If I read this correctly, Visit Pensacola is getting $1,780,000 more than was budgeted?
So you mean for 2021? Or,
I'm looking at expected
okay,
and budget 2021 is $5,997,307.
right? And then it goes to 7,117,000?
Yeah.
And what that difference is it actually will come up on Thursday. So we put a request in to receive the first 3 months of the 5th cent that's being collected. So, we had to put that request in. That really is dollars for April, May, and June collected in May, June, and July. And so we made a request based on what we already knew we collected in April and using the exact same numbers for May and June from 2019, even though we know we're outperforming those months by at least 20%. So we asked for $1.12 million from the 5th cent to be spent this year, in this fiscal year. And so that's the difference. Because up to this point, the 5th cent actually hadn't been included in the budgeting. Although it had been approved for distribution, we have to put a special request to access those dollars. So that's the difference.
So if we wanted to fund the bridge, do we have $100,000 to fund Chappie James Bridge based on this convoluted information?
It would have to be a discussion that we would have here. I think, one thing that I look at from 2020 is that, our board was putting $1.3 million aside in reserves for the Bay Center, which we've now gone 2 years without doing that. And I know that there are some, we're starting to have discussions with Michael Capps on what to do with the Bay Center or start funding the replacement. So I think maybe to satisfy my board, we need to try to include that 1.3 in here somehow for that. And that's not to say that some of these other things can't be spent on ARPA. If we want to divvy that up and do something, I like the idea of putting either a majority of the excess that we collect this year into reserves to help replenish that, because we did take out $500,000 for Visit. I think they were, you said you're already asking to move some into next year that you're going to spend wisely, which I think is the right thing to do. And we go forward from there.
But the question is, if we wanted to do $100,000 for the bridge, it's not on this list. Do we have the funds to do that in looking at the budget of the other unified budget? Outside of the unified budget, do we have the money to do that? I'm not picking on the bridge, I'm just talking about what I've been trying to get to the bottom of is if we made everybody happy in the unified budget, how much money do we have to spend on wine, women, and salt?
I'm looking at this spreadsheet that, same one you're looking at, and under the BOCC County Administration section, there is a 1 through 5 BCC projects line item that's approximately $845,000 that has no specific project. Right. No, I know, I'm just looking.
Okay.
I'm looking at you, Robert, I'm sorry.
Now, with that being said, we
Yes.
have a number of projects,
Right.
including the repainting of the beach ball that need to be done. So, and other projects out there that we were going to start talking about in early 2021 that we just never brought up, knowing that it wasn't the time or the place.
Right.
And I know that for anyone who hasn't met Miss Davis, who's the new executive director of the Island Authority, she's here. I would say she has really hit the ground running in trying to evaluate the needs for some of these projects and other needs on the beach. Again, especially with the water tower, that is a non-functioning water tower that is only an iconic
A tourist attraction.
tour. Yeah, I mean that is a branding for us for that. So.
And if the ECUA would use it, then we could have recycled water at the beach, you know?
Well, we
They
do.
do. They spray that in the medium.
That's why they created that other tank when you drive in.
I would also point out that there seems to be about a $160,000 increase in county administrative costs at 3% for doing the same amount of work. And that's supposed to be a cost analysis on that to calculate the actual cost of
And
administration.
I think we have that. I don't yeah, I mean, well, Amber, just what's
Yes.
specifically on the statutory, on the 3%, what do you have for that?
So we did receive the cost plan back just a few weeks ago, and the total is actually $608,000. So we.
To administer the
Correct,
TDT program?
correct.
That's
And
not
that-
including indirect costs, that's just the 3%
So that would
administrative?
replace the 3%.
Okay.
And that is based off of last year's budget. So
Which is on 4 cents.
it would be on 4 cents.
Last year's actual cost to collect and administer the TDT program.
On the 4 cents, correct.
Right.
Yes,
Of
sir.
which may not exceed 3% of the total by statute.
That's for the administrative costs.
Correct.
So indirect, per a federal cost allocation plan, can exceed the 3%.
Well, it's separate from the 3%.
Correct,
Right, okay.
correct,
But I think this is in lieu of, is
Correct.
what you've talked about.
correct. We would eliminate the 3% and charge instead the cost plan.
So instead of,
I'm not sure that you can legally do that. I'm pretty sure the statute's very clear on the clerk of the court may retain 3%, may retain a portion of the tax collected to administer the program not to exceed 3%.
So this is not the clerk, this is the board choosing to retain, and we can still pay the clerk that 3%.
Okay,
This covers costs in excess of just the clerk. So any cost related to supporting the TDT is included in this allocation plan. This is actually a highly scrutinized plan. Our company, Maximus, that we utilized, is used to being scrutinized across the state of Florida specifically, because the DOR is watching this very closely this year, and they apply the same strategies and federal regulations to our cost plan as they have to other entities across the state.
Would you mind sharing that with the TDC
Absolutely, I have
members?
copies.
That'd be great, thank you.
Now, this is a several hundred-page document.
That's great.
I gave you just the cover page and the page that shows the allocation to your fund, which is Fund 108. We did not choose to allocate two of the line items. They're very small. So if you want to see the whole plan,
like
I can
the whole-
certainly share it with you.
That'd be great. Do you have an electronic form you could email?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yes, I
Thank
didn't
you.
want to kill trees.
Yeah, thank you.
So what is it that we're going to decide as it relates to the budget and the outside agencies?
So today, unfortunately, because this is a workshop, we actually can't take formal action. What we can do is come together in an agreement, and we can schedule a follow-up meeting
To take the vote?
to take the vote.
So, just as a matter of interest, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
is there somebody here from Africa American Heritage? I know there is the Naval Aviation Museum.
Yep.
And, I mean, is there somebody here from all of these
I
agencies?
do not know. They've made the request.
I would say those have usually come in front of our board.
Yes.
They haven't come from this board, historically.
So, are you saying it comes to you, and then you recommend to us?
No, I would say that I would say that it just comes to our board.
And we have nothing to do with it.
Yep.
We
How-
have nothing to do with the outside agency?
It goes to their board and they decide upon if
No. I just want, I ask you,
My understanding is that it's outside the plan, outside of the, what would be considered the authority of this board.
okay, well, back to the question is, if somebody came here tonight and they wanted $100,000 for the Chappie James Bridge,
I think it would go a long way if that was a recommendation of this board
okay,
to our
so how
board.
do we get to that?
And just a reminder, $4 million carryover from this fiscal year, and 35% of that, if we agree that setting up a reserve for the future makes good sense, 35% of that's $1.4 million. And how the TDC wants to recommend to the board how to invest those dollars, there's certainly opportunities there. Any other questions for me?
We think you're doing one hell of a job.
We're having a great year. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
I mean that.
So is there anyone here from UWF Historic Trust? No.
And Amber, just for they did only request $200,000 this year, correct? Or
They
do you
did.
want to run down what you have on file for, what was the African American Heritage? What did they request?
Sure. African American Heritage Society requested $50,000. Of course, Sertoma is the $75,000 as usual.
How much was it African American?
50,000.
So now, why wouldn't that appear anywhere on this handout? It's 30,000 all the way across the board.
So as Darren spoke a little while ago, he said he took those numbers, historic numbers, and moved them forward.
Right.
He was not submitted the.
He and I
these
spoke-
So
agencies
the
did not.
information we have is,
I would say on that section.
And that
yeah.
section is based off of historic numbers that he was making the recommendation as a talking point to this board.
so
That he's
who did
said 3
the
times.
African American Association go to go from 30,000 to 55? Where'd they,
So it's not yet approved. The board,
no, I'm not
They
asking.
submitted their
and it was
request to the
submitted.
county.
Correct.
To who?
The Board of County Commissioners.
They
Do you want to know
submitted,
the person's name? The person's name would be my
No, I'm
office.
just,
hey, Jim, they supported, made the request to the Office of Management and Budget, just like all of the outside agencies do every single year during the budgeting request process. So Amber has received those requests directly, that then she is putting together into a budget she's going to submit to the BOCC. Darren did not receive those requests, so he submitted to us what historic funding was last year.
But
the
why
current year.
wouldn't we have had what Amber had?
I can certainly provide that. I'm not,
No, I mean before this meeting. Go ahead down the list. I'm dying to know.
okay. So Naval Aviation Museum requested 200,000. West Florida.
Up from 100,000.
That is correct. West Florida Historic Preservation Board requested 200,000, down from 225. And that is it.
So
And then separately,
the
we have,
fireworks
So 75,000,
is the same,
correct.
and St. Michael Cemetery is the same.
That's,
those were all rolled up into the UWF
Correct,
back in 19.
several years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm trying to understand what you said, because the first one, 55, the second one, 200, third one, 200, and the rest of them, what are the numbers?
There are only 4 requests, and they total 525,000. So you should have Sertoma fireworks for 75,000, African American Heritage Society for 50, Naval Aviation for 200, and then West Florida Historic for 200.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that wants some more money?
Yes, and then we've received the request directly to this board that did not make a request through
To the Board of
BOCC.
County Commissioners.
That is asking for money for the Chappie James. And I think that, again, a recommendation by this board to our board that some of those funds be used for that, I think would go a long way.
Will we find out, or does it matter why there are increases that are asked for in some of these things?
Yes, ma'am, I know that the Naval Aviation Museum is here to talk about those.
Okay.
yeah, which is next on the agenda. Since UWF is not here, we can ask them if they would please come speak. Thank you. Thanks, Amber.
Commissioner, while they're coming up there, could you help me understand the rest of these folks that are on the list that this board does not have to approve, or really we even get to look at these amounts of 30,000, 100,000, 225,000, 75,000? Are any of these actually bringing heads and beds, or is just something the county commissioners can just say, hey, you come request of funds from us and we approve it, and then it surpasses this board?
I think that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that the Board of County Commissioners has more control over the 4 cent, that they fit in the areas that would be allowed for those expenditures. And so that's where historically, before my time even, that the board would put those. I would say other things like Sertoma, the 75,000 would go to the unified budget or visit, and then it was handed out by visit. I believe that happened 2 years. That's the actual 2020. That's what happened in 2020, was that visit got the 75 and went back to them, and for whatever reason, we've just pulled it back out. So it's instead of, I think the UWF historical preservation they would say that would be driving things. That is highlighting our historical past and funding that. Their increase from 120 to 225 now includes the cemeteries that are listed. So that was partial. That was part of the reason they had that increase, was to roll the cemeteries and the historical significance of those, and a lot of that is I think maintenance cost, to keeping the cemeteries nice.
What about the album?
Sorry, what?
I don't understand your question.
He's asking.
Oh,
That's all right.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Kyle Kozed, President and CEO of the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation. And we did indeed request consideration for a $100,000 bump in our historical $100,000 that we received. And really, that's targeted at STEM outreach program growth. So historically, we've invested that $100,000 in our National Flight Academy, which brings in students and families from around the country. This year, as I briefed last time, we have an opportunity really at a locally targeted STEM outreach program that targets disadvantaged Title I schools in the local area called Starbase. We were approved for that. We anticipate that we'll open the doors in January of 2022. But really what that does is it gives us an opportunity to think differently about the National Flight Academy and really our regional and national reach. We have an opportunity to leverage these programs to create and we've got a handout here that I think you all have, what I consider a Northwest Florida STEM Center of Excellence, where we can target not only local schools, charter schools locally, but we can also take advantage of a restoration capability that we have on campus so that we can continue to leverage different components of STEM outreach and education to enhance what we've traditionally done for our National Flight Academy. So instead of just summer programs, we're able to target the Aviation Center of Excellence over at Bob Sykes. We're able to target regional universities that have aviation programs to bring them into the local area, take advantage of some of the STEM resources we have. So I'll pause for any questions or any specific details. The document that you have goes into a pretty great length of detail on what this does for us locally, but also nationally and regionally.
And going forward, would you, the ask, I guess it's been 100,000 for a while. Do you know if the new ask will be 200,000?
I would anticipate that, and really, that's all targeted toward this additional growth. Right now, I'll consider, we've got 3 programs that we offer. So we've got the Flight Adventure Deck, which is our day camp or field trip experience for middle schoolers that we offer to Santa Rosa and Escambia County. We've got the National Flight Academy, which brings in kids, some locally, but some regionally, internationally, and across the country. That's program number 2. Now with Starbase, it's completely local. And we've got an opportunity to really build that into, instead of a 5th grade program that targets disadvantaged Title I students, to really cast an umbrella for the entire counties, adjoining counties, to include K through 12, but also expand those programs so there's offerings that touch aviation-centric colleges and universities.
Do you guys get any sort of funds from Santa Rosa County?
So not directly. So we will get some limited funding from Starbase, from the Department of Defense, that will cover supplies, and it will cover the staffing. So it comes with 2 teachers, a director, a deputy director, and an administrative assistant.
Will you get any funds from the Escambia County School District?
I'm working on that right now. To date, the only commitment that we have from Dr. Smith is for busing to and from the Starbase, which is, just for a refresher, it's a 25-hour curriculum which ties into what Escambia County is teaching. So it's not a field trip, it's an opportunity for the kids to come to the Flight Academy, use the training and education resources. So that's the only commitment we have right now. I have another meeting later this week with somebody on their school board that hopefully will bear a little more fruit.
Well, I think it's it's outstanding and it's an excellent program. My only concern is about, we always, the measure is putting heads in beds.
Right.
With the TDC dollars. I don't know that I see this as a local project and possibly Okaloosa and, the neighboring counties, but I don't know how many heads in beds it's going to bring.
Yeah, and I told Mr. Bender that I can't provide those numbers today. I think your sense is exactly right for the near term, really looking at that local program. Longer term, as we develop these things out, I think there is an opportunity to attract from outside for heads and beds.
But I think it's a great program. Please don't misunderstand. It's
No,
just-
it won't stop me.
So are these programs transient programs? I mean, do they bus in for the day and then leave? Or are they going to be spending the night and spending money in the community other than just at the facility and leaving?
So with the exception of the National Flight Academy, which is where we've really previously invested, all those programs are local. So they come from Escambia, middle school. They come from, local schools. So no impact to, beds and racks. National Flight Academy that we are looking to expand, and we've invested. We haven't had a program for 2 years. We've invested that money in IT refresh, so we've got fresh equipment for next year. We're just about fully booked for our program for next year to bring in that revenue, to bring in the heads and beds. And we're looking for those ways to expand it, through means of some of these other components of a STEM Center of Excellence.
I was going to say, of course, historically, I think the $100,000 has gone towards maybe more of a museum, as it does relate to tourism, having that great asset where people can have something to do on days like this morning, and of course, opening those doors and getting people to come visit the museum, just for the sheer volume and excellence that museum has. And then I think, as he was also saying, though, is that when you look at something like the Flight Academy, which I think is great, those are things, as I said, how many people drop their kid off for the week or for the program and end up staying during that same time. I know that, my wife and I, we've looked at kids going to camp and where we could go as they're at camp, and then we're still close by, and then we pick them up on the way back home. So ideally, we would, I think there could be some correlation to that in the bigger sense. STEM in our community, though, is, again, I don't know the exact request here. I haven't seen the backup on that, but hopefully we'd still be able to fund some of what we've done in the past, and then also look at expanding this opportunity.
Have you, go ahead, Mr. Reeves.
Let me ask, is the Flight Academy back in business after last year?
So no summer programming this summer. So the money, $100,000 from this year, is going towards IT refresh, so our simulators for our network classrooms, and curriculum revision. So the next program we'll run is actually next summer. Actually, it'll be Starbase in January of '22, but the Flight Academy, as we know it, will probably be spring time frame of '22, certainly summer time frame where we're almost fully booked.
So did the legislature in the last session appropriate any money to the Flight Academy?
Yes,
$421,000?
$421,000, yes, sir.
And the year before that, 421?
421. And that was used, so that was used for a program called Take Flight. So we invested that, and really, one of the deficiencies we found with COVID was we really didn't have some sort of a distance learning application. As schools pivoted to remote education, there was really no equal component to that for the National Flight Academy. So we invested in a company with that those funds to take individual simulators to students in JROTC schools around the region to be able to apply some of those, learn some lessons learned, because that's one of the components that we want to build out here in the future, is not only a National Flight Academy here, but also something regional.
Does Delta continue to support the Flight Academy?
Absolutely. Delta, FedEx, Hilton hotels are three of our biggest contributors.
And originally, this $100,000 was really for the museum, not for the Flight Academy originally. And back to her point about heads and beds, but the Flight Academy will produce heads and beds because people come from all over. The former Speaker of the House from Wisconsin, son went through the Flight Academy. So in that case, we are putting
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're looking to grow that.
heads and beds.
So the question I was going to ask was, Robert had mentioned that when the students come to the Flight Academy and they stay on campus in the barracks, or I guess on the ship, that the parents could be staying, because that's what a lot of families do when they go on vacation.
Correct.
Have you guys done any surveys to quantify that? How
I'm
many-
sure we have. I can provide that at a later date. I don't have that at my fingertips. I'll have to go back to our marketing folks.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I can provide that as a
Yeah,
follow-up.
because that, I think that would be really useful information for us to determine how many heads are in beds. I mean,
Okay.
because the students are staying on the ship.
They are,
so
they are.
that's not in the hotels or they're not out in the community. But if the parents are sticking around, staying at the beach or in town somewhere, that's huge impact. So
Okay.
that'd be great information.
I'll provide
Does
that.
that make y'all a collector if they're short-term? Just,
No, they're on a Navy,
Oh, okay.
federal
Okay.
property.
All right, any other questions I can answer?
Any other questions? No? Great, thank you so
All
much.
right,
We
thanks for the
appreciate it.
consideration, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral.
Is anyone here from Sertoma? Talk about this wonderful Sunday night show they had? No? All right.
I got a question with
Yes.
Sertoma. I seen that it said it was sponsored by Skanska, so what was the 75,000 that was taken from the board or county commissioners? Why does it never say sponsored by Board of County Commissioners or?
Yeah. I would have to find out. My understanding is that the overall operation of the event is a bigger event than just the fireworks. And that it goes towards some of that, I think in Skanska's, Skanska maybe donated or let them use the barge that the firework. Yeah, they, their sponsorship was the barge. So I think they, I mean, yeah, I'm not even gonna go there.
one that tore the bridge down.
I hope
So-
it was anchored.
Anyway, yes, those are the ones that get to pile in. And so I think that's where, I don't know what their sponsorship was, if that was a naming opportunity, or what.
Do any of these that get funds directly from the Board of County Commissioners, do they come back and show you guys anything, or they just get the money and then they do what they want with it?
I think there would, some of them, I don't think they just get to do whatever they want to with it. You know, I know some of them, we have given them the money up front, like we had in 2020. And that's why we weren't necessarily able to cut some of those outside agencies, because the money had gone out in September of, October of 2019. And so I know that the historical preservation, they've worked with the African American Heritage to try to help them with grants. I know that that's what Rob is doing, and as part of the direction from our board is to have them work together. I don't know how successful they'll be. That's probably something we'll learn about in 2 weeks. But it would still be the regular requirement. I guess the clerk's office is still here on what they look for those expenditures.
Yeah, I'd like to learn, because I know Visit Pensacola, and I was on that board before, where Visit Pensacola turns receipts in to the clerk. I'm curious with all the rest of these groups that get funds, if they're turning in receipts to verify where their funds are going and how that works.
I think if you'd like to.
I'm Tammy Plant from the clerk's office, and we do require receipts. We don't just write checks to anyone.
Okay.
Receipts, canceled checks, bank statements, contracts. Okay?
Is that information public when they turn in receipts? Do they, like, for instance, Sertoma, if I'm a person of the public, could I go somewhere and find to see where they've spent that money, that 75,000? Is there a way I could look that up?
Yes, you can put in a public records request.
Okay,
There may be things we have to redact, but yes, it's all public record.
okay.
Okay?
And just, going back to 2020, actual, we didn't have the fireworks. I think they'd canceled them before they did a lot of the expense. So that money was rolled into the unified budgets. They essentially held on to it. Is it accurate, Darren? Yeah, it's part of the cuts, yeah. I mean, either way you cut it. I guess that was also the year that we had rolled it over to you guys anyway, so we'd given the extra money, so it just wasn't in there.
We also do require that quarterly goals and metrics be reported by each community partner that ties in directly to the grant application request. And those quarterly metrics are reported to the Board of County Commissioners. So they're available to the public.
Thank you. You have any other questions?
So do we have anybody from the University of West Florida here?
No, sir. No one came
Just
forward when I
request
asked.
another 100,000?
Is there anyone from the African American Heritage Society? No.
And why would theirs have gone up from,
So they made the request, the increase from
Yeah.
30 to 50,000 to the county.
oh, okay, so we don't know what that increase would be.
We don't know.
Okay.
Well, $100,000 increase, you would think.
Now, the $100,000 increase was the
Was the Naval Aviation.
Naval Aviation Museum, who we just heard from.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
did-
well, what about the University of West Florida?
Theirs went down $25,000.
Okay, well, who's the other one that wants 100,000?
Probably the bridge is what you had indicated earlier. And I believe Butch, I'm guessing Cedric's sitting next to him, so I'm thinking they're together. But I think that's the other, based on the chairman.
Yes, so the requests that were made to the county was UWF Historic Trust for 200,000. Last year, they received 220, or the current year, they received 225,000. So they requested less than they were currently receiving. Naval Aviation Museum currently is receiving 100,000, and they made the
They asked
request
for
for
200.
200. Sertoma
Heritage,
has asked for the
folks
same.
have asked for 25,000 more.
Sertoma's asking for the same. It's African American Heritage Society has asked for $20,000 more.
Well, is there anybody else that wants money?
Well, we have others on here, and we have some folks that are interested, so I guess we can go ahead and call up the Chappie James folks, if y'all want to present. Thank you. Butch and Cedric.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Bear, and also to the board. Just for a little historical context, because this is my first time before you all. But we are here, myself and retired U.S. Navy Captain Butch Hansen. We both sit on the board, actually, for the General Chappie James Memorial Foundation. And as you may know from a previous presentation, the request was for $300,000 for the foundation, which would be part of us raising actually a total of $940,000. What we were requesting was $300,000 for both the sculpture that would be created by a world-renowned sculptor who himself is a former U.S. Air Force pilot, along with the pedestal and the delivery and the setup of the statue and the statue of General James as well. But I think I would be remiss not to mention the fact, though, that I think we all understand the historical context of one of our own from this community who went on to do a unsurmountable amount of great deed, particularly during World War II and right up until his death at a very early age of 59. So it would be certainly an iconic site as you approach on and exit the Chappie James Bridge, which was named and approved last year, I believe it was, or in 2019. So our request for $300,000 previously had been made here, and we're requesting $300,000 with a great deal of humility, understanding the complexity of what you all are confronted with. But this would be certainly very helpful to the history, carrying out the history of this great community itself, and also being able to recognize a very iconic individual who was born and raised here in Pensacola and went on to do great things, and that is General Daniel Chappie James, Jr. So I'll stop here and let my colleague and board member here add anything else he'd like.
Yes, what Cedric said, certainly, but as I mentioned before, this is the beginning of a fundraising campaign for this. It'll be at a national level, seeking both grants and participation by defense contractors, other veterans groups, as well as donations that, in my experience in this business, many contractors are very anxious to get involved and have lots of in-kind donations, which would probably decrease that total amount that we've gotten estimates from our engineers, et cetera. So again, as I mentioned last month when I first addressed you, very much appreciate your consideration. We believe this will be a memorial, a monument of national significance. Its dedication is timed with the 75th birthday of the United States Air Force, September 18th, 2022. Hopefully that is well after the actual bridge is dedicated, but we're not tying our dedication of the Memorial Plaza to the bridge itself. But we thank you for your consideration, ready to answer any specific questions.
So is it 200 or 300?
300.
This is all you want. You're never going to come back again.
Yes.
That's the best answer.
So I understand there were comments that had been previously made about this project, that it would be funded from private donations. Was that accurate?
Yes, certainly the rest of the money needed for the site development and the aircraft, to procure and prepare the aircraft and put it on a pedestal also, and the flag and the other historical information will be put into the plaza itself.
So is it going to be on the Santa Rosa side or the Escambia
The
side?
Pensacola side. It'll be, the site has been selected. It'll be over by the visitor center, between the visitor center and the overpass there, and it'll be high enough so it can be seen from the road. And the plans have a walking and bicycle path that go around the bridge and right past there. So, and it's fully accessible. There's west side. What do they call it? The park there has plenty of parking for accessibility also. So we've worked that out with the mayor and the city as far as that location. It'll be in that city park. That's parkland there.
Has the city committed any funds to this?
Not yet, other than to help with aircraft procurement, and we have a separate request for them. Yeah.
Well, why don't you ask them the heads and beds question?
Will this produce heads and beds?
Yeah, that's all right.
Can that be quantified?
Well, we think absolutely, just because of the national stature of General James, the number of veterans groups that we already have come into Pensacola for reunions, memorial services. I can attest to that by what we see in Veterans Memorial Park. Almost every week, we have a group that's coming over there, usually from the beach, that are in hotels out there. And this will only be enhanced, because most of Pensacola is the cradle of naval aviation, but this is going to add a whole Air Force piece to that. And the Air Force units just to the east of us are very interested in this and already participating also. So.
And it seems that just from the single event of the anniversary and dedication, that could produce some significant heads and beds as well, just from that one event, based on some possible dignitaries throughout the armed services, et cetera, that would be coming in for it. And I think, I think if you also look at it from what does the publicity get you from a marketing standpoint?
Well, one thing we're taking a great deal of consideration is that next year will mark the 75th anniversary of the United States Air Force. And we want to try to tie all this together around that time. So that certainly, our hope is certainly to create a great deal of national attention with national dignitaries that would come into the community to help honor this very special day as well.
And I guess that's my point, is that what, you know, from a marketing standpoint, the coverage and the press that we could get from that event, what is that alone worth that we'd be spending on? And then you have the benefits after the date of people coming to visit and things like that. So I think there is a marketing value of significance with tying in with the 75th birthday. And then also, again, just the coverage we may get of whoever comes in conjunction with that.
Not everything that we've ever spent money on has produced heads and beds, but I really think this is the right thing to do. But I'm gonna let somebody else make a motion, because I've made 10 motions and only 1 have passed and 9 have failed.
Well, and I don't disagree about the marketing of this and the significance of this project for our area and for the history that we have here. But one of my biggest concerns is it allowable expense under the tourist development tax statutes? It talks about being able to do beach renourishment. It talks about certain types of specific projects that it can be funded for improvement, capital improvements. It does not specifically state this type of project, and the statute does say if it's not listed, then it's an unauthorized expenditure. So the concern would be whether or not it's even authorized for us to spend these dollars on that type of project. I think it's a very important project to our community, and I think that, it's obviously significant in what it's representing, but additionally, it's public art, and I'm obviously very in favor of public art. It's just whether or not we can spend the money to build it. We can certainly spend the money to market it and make that investment.
So just looking at some of the uses, is it, would this be, is this statute or this whole project going to promote tourism and or support an activity, service, venue, or an event that is attractive to tourists? I think
Is
that's,
that marketing
that,
it or building it?
well, to support an activity, service, that's that one. Acquire, construct, extend, enlarge, remodel, repair, improve, maintain, operate, or promote publicly owned and operated convention centers, sports stadiums, sports arenas, coliseums, auditoriums, aquariums, or museums that are publicly owned and operated or owned and operated by not-for-profit organizations. It says finance beach park facilities, which I don't want to say this is on the beach. I think we could probably definitely ask for an opinion if that's what you're going towards, because, and I'd say the clerk staff would do that before they would do anything anyway, so.
Possibly.
Yeah, they say they do it, so.
And we might have a different opinion.
Understand. But I think if it's something that the board would like to do and the clerk agrees that it would be an approved use, then I think that we're all in agreement that it could be used for that.
When you say the board would like to, you're talking about the BCC.
This board.
We would make the recommendation to the BCC.
I
Yeah.
move,
We don't have the authority to spend the money.
oh, that's right.
Yeah, we can't make,
We can only make recommendations.
yeah, we can't
Okay, well,
take action today.
I think what we ought to do is support it and make sure that the county attorney is on board with the utilization, Mr. Chairman.
So
Let me just ask Butch, I mean, I know you said $900,000. I understand there's the reason for this request of getting it started. Is there, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of us that you brought last time of what all that entailed. I guess, is there something that could possibly be more palatable for the board? Is that a fair question from this board, or, again, looking at what it can be spent on, I'll let you just, because it sounds like there's support, but we just need to make sure that it's spent within the right.
Yes, we fully understand, and we'd certainly be appreciative of any support that we would get from this council as well as the county commissioners. But the reason why we're asking for this much money is to get Mr. Ed Dwight under contract. That's the longest lead time is to do the sculpture and manufacture it and get it shipped here and get the proper pedestal. So that's what, and we also see this as a springboard to our other fundraising activities within the private sector that certainly the community is fully supportive of our activities and recognize the value. I think Commissioner Bender's absolutely right that the original dedication is likely to more than pay back the investment that we asked for. So, and what we expect will happen.
Isn't it in your district?
It is. It is.
Well, we're going to have you do the speech, you know.
So has there been,
I believe I will be a low man on that totem pole that day.
has there been
much
any
more
private
worthy.
funding of this project yet?
Nothing of significance yet, but we're planning a nationwide campaign that will involve people like Navy Federal Credit Union. We've made appeals to them. As I said, with last year's pandemic and the bridge going down and all that, we curtailed any effort to raise money to try to not tie ourselves to all that was going on. But in the next year, we've already started Great Guns looking at other grants that are applicable. We've approached some of the major corporations and we've already got feelers out to major defense contractors, et cetera, like McDonnell Douglas, who made that F-4 aircraft that'll be on a stick hopefully before long. So yes, that's what we're doing, and we've started to socialize the need. It's gotten attention at the highest levels of the Air Force, as well as perhaps the Department of Defense by now. So.
Would you still do this project if you did not get the $300,000 ask from this council?
Absolutely, we'll find a way to do it.
Thank you.
We can't take any action today.
Well,
I may have mentioned and it was in one of the handouts I gave to you before, but just to further answer Mr. Patel's question, our motto is "Thou shalt not quit," which the general adopted from his mother, who ran a private school for black children up on Alkanay Street. That was their 11th commandment. So.
And I was one of her students in 1960. If I could add, just add one thing, we're going to be quite ambitious in terms of trying to acquire as much funding as as we can. But as we end here, myself and Butch want to be clear so we can report back to the board. I'm assuming you're just going to table any motion until until you receive other information. Because I just want to be able to report back to the board very clearly what took place here.
so what's taking place today is a workshop. So we actually, as a body, can't take formal action.
Okay.
to,
But you could
but
ask.
we can make
You
recommendations.
could say,
Yes.
you know, Mr. Reeves, are you in support? And I would say yes, and you could say, Mr. Bear, are you in support? You know,
We can
those
do
are the
straw
kind of
votes.
things you could ask. Otherwise, any reason to have a workshop.
Right, we can take a straw vote and come back and take formal action as a board later. So today, we're having the discussion about, proposed budget, what's from the clerk's office, the county's office, OMB, what is the overall budget going to be built off of, the TDC, TDT budget, and then what are the requests? You guys are part of that request. We're going to also, further on our agenda after this section is asking the county to come back up and tell us, these items that Visit Pensacola has put together in their section, is that what they're putting together in their budget, et cetera. And so then this board, this council, this body will do a straw vote, if you will, to try to come to some consensus that we can come back and take action upon.
Okay.
So that's where we are today.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We humbly appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And what I hear, Mr. Chairman, is the board wants to do it, and they'd like us to share in the responsibility. That's
The BOCC?
the
County
PCC wants to do it, but they'd like not to do it just in spite of us.
I would say that I know that, I think I've at least budgeted internally a donation from my discretionary funds. I think a few of the other commissioners have done that as well. It wouldn't be anything on the magnitude of what this board is considering. But I just know that I feel that we all feel it would be a good place, a good thing for our community, and that's why I would be giving some of that money. I don't know if from general fund, if that's probably a little bit tougher sell. But I think if
It's a much larger fund.
it's already adequately well underfunded. But
Maybe ARPA.
well, I was going to say, I don't know, of course, we have the 1.5. I know, we could probably use it to offset. I would want to ask, I think Amber had said that whereas the 3% administrative cost is currently at 461, that we were looking at 605 or so. Huh? 608 was what they were looking at. And I would say that it's probably something that as a county we're looking at across the board as to realize the cost that some of these programs and departments have on the general fund. And that when we could ask for, and when we have grants, that we're making sure that the grant includes the full amount that it's actually costing us to operate it, and not just a 3% or 0%, that the taxpayers are ending up having to offset. So with that being said, I think that with the board wanting to support this, I don't think we're going to jump to 608 after the first year,
Can we take it out of that?
I think, I'd like to see you again next week, David, I don't want you to,
Well,
And-
but do you feel that the request has support from the Board of County Commissioners?
I haven't been able to talk to them. I don't know if they've had any talks with the rest of our board. I think overall it is a project that our board supports. As a number of us have also indicated support from our discretionary funds. And I think if that was something that this board thought was a suitable expense out of the fourth cent, or finding a way from one of the other 3 cents to pay for it, I think the board should look favorably upon that. Again, I can't speak for them. I don't know what other conversations other people are having, but I think it's, again, I think it would be a great event for our community to come together and support this. Again, the publicity that it would give us would be well worth the investment. With that being said, though, I would also, I think we just need to, like I said, I think historically, and knowing that we have some other upgrades that we want to make to the Bay Center, that 1.3 that we had been spending on debt service, you know, we had, the Board of County Commissioners had said that we wanted to continue to collect that and put that in a reserve fund for either the renovation or replacement of the Bay Center. And I think it's, I think it would be important that we continue to do that, knowing that the Bay Center has an ask that they're working on what could be done. So if I, you know, going off of what Darren's sheet has, my numbers would still be the same for the top two boxes. I'd have 5,050,000 or 56,000 as the total for the second box. I have 625 for the third box based on just the requests that have been done. Again, this is all up for discussion.
525 or the 6?
625 would include the
100,000.
100 to them, or if we wanted to adjust that, I was just going off of what Mr. Reeves had said earlier. And again, we still have the ARP monies out there. So I, don't stroke out. That would leave 8.925 million for the unified budget. Again, all of this is this is just where I am right now. I'm not.
So less than they were allocated in 2019.
Well, I'm anxious to see what they're rolling out for RV resorts.
So let me just say, no, it's more than what their actual spend from 2019. It was 8.9, so they got 8.7, but that was also after the supplemental.
Right.
So this is before.
But there's
and-
been no discussion about the supplement other than putting it into reserves that Darren
Right.
mentioned.
And I think there's also, you know, I think, you know, we have a, you know, we have a number here. I don't know what this number, I don't have a makeup of what that number entails. And I think that would be something we want to look at. I know that, again, we have ARPA money. We have, as Darren says, we have some of the money that's been has been collected from the 5th cent coming in there that they wanted to either put in reserves or spend for next year, which I think the prudent thing for my board to do would be to accept that. I don't want to push them to have to spend all of it this year, but I want to stay true to my commitment that the first year would go towards marketing dollars, as I see other people in the room that I made that commitment to. So that's something I would want to stick to. So I don't know where the rest of the board is. I think again, we could offset some of these other expenses. I think from the ARPA to also the ARPA has 4 years to be spent. So, you know, it's a line item here. So if we had some uses from that funds for this year, which again, I would get some treasury direction on some of the things from the first through 3 cents or the first through 5 cents for the BCC on if some of those things could be spent, and then we could move that down to marketing. I think would, because I know we're a large distance from the 10.4 requested from Unified and 8.9, so I'm not,
Right.
I'm trying to also get them there, but also meet the needs of everything else. Now, of course, I mean, that's a $1.5 million difference. I mean, so if you found it up top to move it back down, I think that the money could be spent to help renovate the Bay Center as it relates to COVID-related activities, if that's part of the things that they're doing. And so if that was something that we wanted some of that 1.5 to go to, that would be coming from probably the 1.3, I think that's...
Well, is there conversation about the improvements being made to the Bay Center to help offset the annual subsidy that's being made? Where, what is it that they want? What is it that they need to be able to operate without a subsidy? And let's make that investment, let's bond the TDT over a certain period of time so that we don't have to do, because then you just take the 1.5 that's already there and put it into the improvements.
So
and then-
that I think only includes a $200,000 capital improvement. That is the remaining portion of that is actual cost to operate. That is not improvements or...
Right, that's what I'm saying, but
Right,
what is
yes,
it
but
they
yes,
need?
we would hope
What kind
that-
of improvements can the county make into that facility so that the management company no longer needs to depend on a subsidy, the operation subsidy?
I think
that would be a
that's
good
definitely
investment.
something, the talks that we're having with Michael and letting him take over the reins and move forward with that. And I think he understands that we want to limit that supplement to them.
Right.
But as I also heard from, that I asked their vice president of operations or whatever, when he was down, was, what percentage of your venues operate? I'm not saying we can't be one of the ones that doesn't operate in the black, or that does operate in the black, but I think we also need to be realistic in what we expect, and I think that if we really want to offset this 1.5 number, then you're going to have to make a lot more in improvements to get the to have that venue working for you every weekend, with cheerleading or cyber or whatever.
Or working for us during the week.
Or working for us during the
I mean,
week.
we're, because of our population size and where we're geographically located between, say, Jacksonville and New Orleans, we catch a lot of the concerts that are playing weekends at those venues. They can play here during the week if the facility is available to them, and and it's got the right space. I mean, if it's the needs to operate, then they can operate. And I think we need to have that. Obviously, that's a much bigger discussion than we were planning to have today, but I think that's an important piece of this overall projection of TDT use, is to look at how can we invest in the facility that we own so that it's no longer the management company, it's no longer dependent on a subsidy. How can we help them help us as a community? And we can continue to spend $1.5 million on the subsidy every single year, or bond that 1.5 over a 5-year period to make an improvement, $7.5 million, I'm just using numbers, I don't know what it is, but $7.5 million over 5 years, that after 5 years, they're operating without the need of the subsidy, and that expense goes away and can be reallocated to other important programs in our county.
I think that's what the 1.3 could be spent for, that we've been putting, that we hope to be starting to put in reserves. I would say the other thing that I don't see on here is a reserve allocation.
Right. Well, we have $500,000 added to beach renourishment. If you look at that BOCC County Administration section, from 2019 at 2.2 million, 2,243,854, it's up to 3,756,000, which with this 461,000 for administration, but we're just told it's going to be 600 plus thousand. And you're now saying also another one, that 1.3 we want to put up there. So that would take it up to 5 million plus, which is well more than double what it was 2 years ago in that section. And we're not even getting to that, to these other types of programs like Chappie James, et cetera.
So, I mean, if at the 5 million, that is 30%, right? 33%.
33%.
Yeah, add in the other 625. I mean, you're 36 maybe. I'm just talking from a percentage standpoint. And that's why I'm saying that I think that some of these expenses that are listed under that 3.7 are probably something that we might be able to use the ARPA funds on to help offset that and have that additional money go towards marketing.
I would think the ARP funds could be used for this other project because it's not a collected TDT. It's federal money that has a totally different guideline on how it can be used versus the statute on TDT that could pay for the statute. Possibly. I don't know. I haven't been to a workshop, so I don't know. On it,
Let's see
I
here.
haven't seen that. We can just defer beach nourishment for another year.
Yeah, I think
Think that's a bad idea?
I think that's a very bad idea. We're already on the, and I'd be happy to have the Island Authority discuss that, we're already getting very skinny in some portions of the beach, and that's going to be coming up sooner than I think we really anticipate. Sorry, I'm trying to go through some of the pictures I took of the presentation. Again, unless I think it is a park, the Chappie James, and I think indicating as such would give you a wide berth. It's part of a larger waterfront park area. It's bringing people outdoors, which of course is a checkbox. And I think that if you're saying use ARPA on that, I think that could be something that we could get a decision on as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure under the TDT statute that it's an allowable expense. But from what I understand, my limited understanding of the ARPA funds, that it could be used, and that would certainly solve the problem, that issue. Only that issue. Other issues we need to address.
Also to our hoteliers and everybody that we've pledged to try to spend this money for, that would be good.
Right, because then we can, then Visit Pensacola can use that project as a marketing piece to market. I mean, whether it's for Veterans Day, Memorial Day, or just in general, bringing folks down to the Naval Aviation Museum, and hey, while you're in town, seeing Wall South, you can also come see the statue of Chappie James. It's a whole.
I mean, I would be interested to know.
I'm not
Butch,
trying to direct Visit Pensacola.
Butch, I don't know if the Wall South has any data that they collect on who comes to see. I mean, the community has put a ton of investment in the Wall South area, and what does that bring? I mean, I know that people have detoured their their cross-country road trip to make sure they come and see that. Do you know if the foundation has any, sorry to make you switch hats there real quick.
We don't have specific, we don't count the visitors to the Veterans Memorial Park. However, from some of the vendors like Beach Bum Trolley that brings these people from the beach to the park, I mean, they give us numbers, 5,000-6,000 last year is just the one person who brings people. I mean, this spring we've had multiple memorial events from these reunion groups that come in per week over there, and that's why our recent restroom project is so important to us and the community, I think. But no, we don't count them, but most of the people that come to that park are going to the Wall South. They come from all over it. It means that much, both the Vietnam veterans that are getting much older, but also their families. And it's we sort of provide a docent service to help them search the wall all the time there.
All right. Do you mind if I have Darren come back up?
No, Darren?
Just looking for some of your feedback real
Sure.
quick. And also, I was told that the Unified Budget's initial request was about 9.6.
That's right.
And so just want to, how it grew, but also just want to make sure it looks like they've left, but the marketing side of it and making sure that we're adequate on that side.
Sure. So the original request back in, we submitted, planned in March, submitted in April, was $9,582,500, which was based on 65% of the first 4 cents. It was taking in consideration 100% of the 5th cent that we would receive in this next fiscal year. And we didn't actually ask for any of the 5th cent for the remaining months of the next fiscal year. And that's how that was put together. And it was based on that $12.3 million based on 4 cents or the $15,375,000 based on 5 cents. So, and then since then, and talking with my peers, and we're taking a look at the dollars that are coming in, and made attempts to meet with all the commissioners. I've been about 50% successful in doing that, trying to get that feedback of the projects that they're looking at or the other requests. So I didn't actually have as much to go on as I'd hoped to from those discussions. And as far as the $1.3 million that you're mentioning right now, as far as reinstituting that's something that I didn't necessarily have in the numbers or the planning of that on the report that we put together that's in front of you. As far as marketing goes, we were not too long ago in 2019, our budget was at, what do we end up at, just under $8.8 million. And then going into 2020, I mean, that budget was based on $14 million based on the initial amount plus the supplemental. So looking historically of what's been invested in marketing through the unified budget at being 65%, we want to continue as much as that as possible, because historically we've shown that investment has proved the results that was promised back in 2014 of more than 8% growth on average since that time period. And that comes from, consistent marketing efforts. And I can tell you that my goal is to make sure those dollars are leveraged as best as possible to produce the desired outcomes. And so, if we're going to do a proper job of supporting the airport and those direct flights and those new airlines and making sure as many of those flights remain after the trial period and going in through in 2022, I think that's a justified expense. But that's a new effort that we haven't done. We haven't made that kind of investment as we have in the past. Taking a look at another opportunity, which is our snowbird market, and how that impacts our vacation rentals and condo lodging options. You know, we have snowbirds, but we certainly don't have the kind of program or effort that our peers to the west and east of us have put into place. And I think that's certainly an opportunity that we know will produce results, because right now, you know, that outward outreach hasn't really been there.
So, excuse me, one second.
So we're feeling that, that trying to maintain that 65% investment is important. And I think where this comes in at the 8.9 million, probably, what does that put us at, 58%?
So I've got something else for you.
Okay.
Hold on. All right, so 65% of 15.375 is 9.9.
Yep.
We'll just call it 10. So we'll round up to 10. Here would be my suggestion, is that we're going to, we're expected to exceed this year's budgeted amount by $5 million. Based on,
Four, at least.
on four, okay.
Probably more than that, but four, if you add 3.5 million plus the 500,000 holdback, that's about 4 million.
Okay, so 4 million.
Yep.
You know, if the board thought that supplemental could help offset this budget for next year, that instead of putting all or whatever we were thinking of supplemental into reserves, I think if we split that between the delta of this 8.9 and visits request, like I said, it would be 10. I've got 67.7% is 10.4 of 15.375. So again, whatever the board wanted to recommend, that difference come from the supplemental, and then we could put the remaining in a reserve account.
You're talking about a marketing reserve account?
I'd be talking a reserve account.
With what kind of restrictions?
Well, that would, you know, again, I mean, you've got some money that you're bringing forward.
Yep.
Right? And so hopefully that could start something.
Okay.
You know, I think everyone knows that I've been proactive and supported anything that gets spent come in front of this board. And so we would try to do that. I think the other thing is that I think it's a lot easier to put money from a 1 through 3 in a savings, which does give us a little bit of a latitude in how it's spent versus some of the later pennies. And so I think that would be something we would want to look at too, because we would not want to get sideways with spending something from a future allocation or allotment on a not approved expense from what it was originally collected from, if that makes sense. Right. You know, I would say my proposal would be that we, I want to be careful how I say that though, but based off of 15.375, you know, you've got the 5.056 for the BOCC County Administration. And again, the clerk has historically not gone back and tried to get the 3% of things that weren't budgeted, even though, you know, I think we would expect to collect more than 15.375, but that rate would remain the same. The 625 for the outside agencies, provided that we can spend the money. If there's an appetite for more than 100,000, again, this is just what I've put down based on others' comments. And then, you know, do we want to do 65% for the unified budget, or do we want to do it the 67.77 as requested?
So the 67.77 was based off of 65% of the first four, 100% of the fifth of October through April, and then 65% of the remaining year. So
I don't know.
that's what you said a little
That's
while
right.
ago, right?
That's what I said before,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I can support either way. I mean, I think 65% is where the unified budget has been working to get to. The county commission made a commitment of the 100% of the fifth cent for the first year.
I'd
But
be happy to-
65% of the total, from my perspective, would,
I think the 67.77 would show that we've honored, or at least honored as, as much as it's worked out, of getting that extra seventh month in of the fifth cent. And again, I think we could probably look at how ARPA can offset some of these other expenses that we can adjust some money around. In other words, if I can get ARPA to pay for some of this other stuff, I would be happy to try to do that. If that's
Part of
the
the-
will of this board, though.
part of that BOCC admin section and possibly more? Because marketing, you're gonna, I mean, you could use the ARPA for the marketing and all that other stuff too.
I believe
but,
so.
But there's certain projects.
Listen, it would be a lot cleaner if we used it towards getting marketing or something like that. But I would still have to make sure with Treasury. But
If you could use it for the statute, then
Yeah, then we don't need to get an opinion.
that, yeah,
About
if you
the
can use it
statute.
for the statute.
we'll see what we can do. So I guess one is the rest of this board, what's the appetite for the rest of this board for the amount for that, given the original request versus what was proposed?
So the difference in the BOCC county administration section is the 1.3 million going to the Bay Center for capital improvement?
Yes, sir.
So in other words, you're adding 1.3 to that 4.55?
I'm adding 1.3
to the
to the 3.756.
Yeah, the last column is projected for
Okay,
23.
I see it.
And then I've updated the outside agents. Now, again, I don't know where the board would go for the African-American heritage, if they want to keep them at 30 or keep them at 50, but there would be some wiggle room there. So is the will of the board 100,000 or more for the statute?
I mean, if it's, well, I'd like, if it can come from the ARPA, I'd like to make an initial investment, for gift, grant, whatever we call it. But I'm not sure I'd be prepared to make the 300. I'd like to see them do some private fundraising before we commit to the whole thing. But the 100,000 with, a commitment of more, I don't know how to word it, but based on seeing some results from their private fundraising
So,
campaigns.
Butch, I know that's not where you guys came in with the request. Does 100,000 pending sign off from appropriate statutes and things like that, is that get you guys started and show a commitment?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. And I think there would, I think with, sounds like if depending on where it comes from and your fundraising efforts, I think, hopefully there might be something else, but I think with 30% of the fundraising coming from one source at this point might be tough for us to swallow. But, okay.
Yeah. I'd like to see that come out of the ARPA instead of the TDT.
Noted. So we'll see what we can do with that, and I'll try to get some guidance from Treasury. So,
So then that puts the outside agencies back down to 525 as requested. Because we took that 100 out. Well, unless you just want to put it there and allocate it as ARPA, but I guess my question about the Naval Aviation Museum's request to double, if at this point they're not talking about marketing, they're just bringing in local, is the time right for us to be making that investment tourist development tax if it's not developing tourism?
let me work with them, and, you know, again, this was their request. Let's try to flesh out what it does for a tourism standpoint, or if there's, if it, as great as this is, if it doesn't meet our core mission, is there another area within the foundation that we could support that would be more aligned? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I think so. Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Admiral, I'll get with you after this, and we can set up a time to meet and see how we can support your efforts on that. What's our actual year-to-date collected? Do I have that? Oh, sorry, I think I do have it in here. We're only at 7 million plus the 2 million? Yes, it would be, right?
Yeah, I have around $9,035,928.
Okay.
But that doesn't include the 64,000 I quoted earlier.
Right, okay.
That's through May, so we still have June, July of taxes being collected by the,
Correct. That's as of
Short term.
June 30th collections.
So, right, we would still have June, July, and August
right,
to collect.
to collect, which are generally $2 million. On the 4 cents, they're about $500,000 a penny.
Yeah, I think you could probably estimate around 2 for probably the next 3 months.
2 million for the 4 cents or all 5?
I would say probably closer to all 5,
Okay.
just based off historical data.
So I would, just for ease, say 1.5. I might, actually, it looks like 1.5 puts us right there, Aaron. Might even give you 5,000 more than what you're asking for. So I would say that we include 1.5 in supplemental because I mean, I think by all accounts, we're going to blow away this year's budget of 9.995. So where we would say 1.5 of the supplemental, go ahead and be included in the budget for next year. That would all go towards the unified budget. And then that would,
So scratch out the name federal ARPA and change it to supplemental at the bottom there?
pretty much, yeah. I mean, if that's, yeah.
And then some of the BOCC county admin items are coming from the ARPA funds?
That would be our, I think that, as those, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I just always like to make sure, I mean, are you good with that line, or is there, I want to make sure that you've represented who you're representing, and,
I think, I mean, just hearing the numbers that we have for collections, and I know June was for our hotels, was the best June ever. So I will say July has been soft just because of the weather last weekend. So 4th of July weekend was not what we anticipated. But I do think June was good. I do want to make sure Visit Pensacola, what their ask is what they get, in that we make sure that the marketing dollars that have worked, however they've worked to help us this year, are there next year, and that you know, Visit Pensacola has what they need to keep our community successful. I think from the hotelier side, the biggest thing's been to make sure TDT or this council focuses on putting the money back that we collect to keep the pot growing. And not necessarily the pot's big, so let's use it on bridges or the civic center or this and that. So the main focus is for us is to make sure that Visit Pensacola and all the marketing agencies that are helping are getting enough funds to keep Pensacola on the map. And I think for the first time, we're actually able to fight, you know, the counties east and the west of us and kind of for the first time match, you know, as far as hotels are, we're able to actually match the hotels in Destin and Gulf Shores and kind of get our level up as far as rates and that sort of thing, just because we've seen the business here. So I just want to make sure we see that.
Yeah. You know, and again, I haven't had a chance to really flush it out with Ray, but I think, you know, if the will of this board were to use some of these leftover ARPA funds that we don't get spent in this first section to improve facilities that help market us as a destination, I think, again, I think we would probably have a wide berth in how we get those spent. And I think we would be wise to spend those funds on improving our facilities to help recruit people here.
Right.
I think that would be an excellent use so, like I said, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and I know that we have people in the audience from a lot of different organizations, and just want to make sure that they seem to be on board where we are, and that I think this is a good use of funds.
So we're clear. So you want to, what we're all talking about is adding $1.5 million of supplement into the TDT for the proposed 2022 year, which would bring it up to, which including the ARPA $1.5 million, with that 5% holdback, that $16,106,000 that we're looking at on Darren's sheet would make it 17.6, right? So we're adding $1.5 million there for the income. $17,606,250.
Would we be adding to that 16? You keep the ARPA in there and then add?
Well, if we're keeping the ARPA, but then adding $1.5 million of the supplement
Okay,
of the current year that's being collected, roll over into next year's spend.
okay,
So it's not necessarily being collected next year, it's collected this year.
Right.
But then to just be part of the budget to spend for next year. So then of the items that's not listed under the BOCC county admin would be adding 1.3 million to go to the Bay Center for capital improvements from TDT, right, Robert?
Yes.
So that brings that section total for expenses to $5,056,000. You want to round it or 197?
Sorry, say that again.
Just adding the 1.3, so it's $5,056,197.
Yes, sir.
And then for the outside agencies, we don't really have an understanding of what the increase for the African American Heritage, but for now, we submit their request, the 50,000. And the discussion we had a moment ago about just 100,000 to the Naval Aviation Museum, 200,000 to historic preservation, and 75,000 to fireworks. So we have a total of 400 and, what is that?
50.
450? Yeah, just adds 20.
No, 425.
Yeah, 425.
If we can leave
Oh,
the
that's right, 'cause
200
we
in
reduced the-
for naval aviation, yeah, and I mean, our board could have a bigger discussion. I mean, that would,
So 200?
yes, that's what I was hoping for, but of course, we could could flush that out with, that's my intent, is to discuss further and that it align more with the mission of the TDC, and what they're trying to do.
So that'd be 525,000.
Right.
And then keeping the unified budget as it is, really. And instead of having it categorized as federal ARPA, that 1.5 million, that would be the supplement, the 1.5 million supplement.
I think, and Amber, I may need some help on this one, but I think to make sure that we have the funds and everything allocated, we would probably need to add, we want to make sure that our spend is equal to what we have on the top. And with the ARPA funds, I think it just makes it a little bit difficult. So what's the best way to make sure that we've accounted for everything that we're bringing in? I mean, I think ultimately we know that we're probably going to have to increase this total budget by 1.5 million of supplemental. And just want to make sure that
Yes, so.
does just federal ARPA, does that under the unified budget, I mean, does that meet the needs that we have?
So I heard two questions, and correct me if I'm wrong in anything I heard, but the first one was, what do we need to do the top line? We can increase the revenue budget, but it's just like any other budget. If it doesn't come in, we're going to be having not very fun conversations later.
But we're talking about increasing it from the current year's collection that we're going to be exceeding the budget. We budgeted 10 million, we're bringing in 13.5 million approximately, plus the $500,000 that was held back. As Darren was explaining, there's $4 million that is currently being collected in this fiscal year that is unallocated.
So we're essentially wanting to carry forward some of those funds.
1.5
So that
million.
would be an estimated fund balance then to
Yes.
fund that
Yeah.
expenditure.
Yeah.
That's,
So-
we can do that. We do still have some of that money being appropriated though. So Darren's request to the BCC this week is only for April through June, 5th cent.
Right.
He's asked already for a carry forward for July through September. So we'll just have to monitor the collections.
Okay.
But we can certainly do that. It'll just-
Okay, so
that's the first one, right?
year end, so the 1.406 that's shown on this as an expected year end 2021 is, would need to be added to. So what you're saying is that we really only have 3.3 that or 3.4, 3.5 in excess of what was budgeted. Right, so anything over the 10 million, I mean, easy way for me to look at it, the 10.125, that's $125,000, fuzzy math, over the budgeted, plus the 3.375 of the 4th cent, which should be how much over budget we are for the year, because the 1.4 that is expected has already been allocated to visit.
So the agenda item that's going to the board this week is 1.1 million of that 1.4.
Okay.
Okay,
1.12.
right, 1.12 to be exact.
Okay, so I'm still saying then that of the 3.5, 1.5 of supplemental would go
There's
towards
still
the...
sufficient, yes.
Yes. But we also held back 500,000 that is
Right.
unallocated.
There should not be an issue. It just means we appropriate estimated fund balance
Sure.
to balance the budget. So just know that. You're going to see fund balance, not a revenue line item to balance the budget.
Right. Like we did this current year, we moved 200,000 into that,
That's exactly right.
which is on this sheet.
Yes. The other piece that I heard you ask, Commissioner Bender, was about the ARPA. The ARPA funds are accounted for in a different fund from Fund 108, which means that we can only fund eligible expenses, as you've been speaking to, so we could plan to turn in those receipts. So, for example, Visit Pensacola received $500,000 of CARES this past year. You don't see that on any of the Visit Pensacola financial statements because it was accounted for in a different fund. So ARPA would be treated the similar way in that it would be accounted for in a separate fund.
So really, we just need to take the 1.5 ARPA off this sheet, but knowing that we expect to have some funds in that account and that we may be able to allocate some of these expenditures in our BOCC portion towards those funds or use them to improve facilities that can help Pensacola sports.
That's correct.
Okay.
As long as it's an eligible ARPA expense. Yes, that's correct. And you know more than I do at this point.
So I think if we were going to move something, I would just remove the ARPA then.
Okay.
But just know that there's going to be some allocation
So
from the board.
that's under the revenue side, but what expense are we removing? Because we just added 1.3 million that wasn't on here, and it was balancing with that before.
Well, I would remove both of the highlighted lines.
Yep.
And then essentially you replace it with the 1.5, with the carryover.
But you added another 1.3 million to the BOCC.
Well, you've
section.
added 1.3, and then you've also added an extra 195 for outside agencies.
Yep.
Which is why you're saying 1.5.
Is what I'm saying, 1.5.
So that top line that right now is highlighted in yellow and says federal ARPA, we would basically scratch out federal ARPA, and that would be labeled estimated fund balance.
Yep.
And then down below, where it says federal ARPA, that would essentially come up to the BOCC section for 1.3 million of it would come up to BOCC section, correct?
Correct.
And then increase outside agency by 200 for round math.
Yes.
Not that we're giving all 200, but it's a budget.
Yep. I'm including that for right now. Yeah.
Outside agencies, you said go up 200 or?
It would go up 200. If we just, I mean, it's, the requests that we have from those agencies total 625, which is $195,000 over what's listed on this sheet, but,
Well, the 4 agency is just 525, but the 100,000 you're counting,
I'm just going ahead and counting
Okay.
it for,
but didn't we discuss that those would come from the ARPA funds that's no longer on here?
I think we can offset it with another one.
So do we need to put it on here or take it? Oh, offset another ARPA and put it on
Yeah.
here? Then we have the question, is it an authorized TDT use? And we
Correct.
need an opinion.
We'll get an opinion. I guess what I'm saying is that if it is authorized under ARPA and we end up using it from that, I think we can find some other capital, something with sports to move that money into. Are we good, Amber?
I think we're good.
Okay.
The only changes, just to verify, are to change the source of this 1.5 million, meaning that it's coming from estimated fund balance instead of the ARPA. And then under BOCC total, we're adding a BCC reserve of 1.3. And then under outside agency, we're increasing by 200,000. One reason because we received requests of 525 and the other for 100,000 for Chappie James.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. So that's the only changes.
Yep.
All right.
So the added reserve funds are going to the Bay Center, not to the unified budget.
Correct.
So the unified budget will be 10,420,000.
Correct.
outside agencies will be 625,000. BOCC county admin will be 5,056,000.
Yes, sir.
So that's a total of 16,101,250. Okay.
So from a procedural, do we need to convene a special meeting to vote on this?
Yes.
Or could it be presented as in, this is what was worked out in our budget workshop?
So I called the county attorney's office and asked if we could take action, since we really don't have the authority to spend the money, and she said, well, I didn't talk to Allison. He said that we could, he treats this as a committee of the whole type meeting, and so it would be, we could make, we can have this discussion, come to an agreement, but there won't be anything formally coming from the TDC to the BOCC without another meeting to take that action.
So.
So we can have a 1-minute meeting some other time that we have to
Sure.
advertise.
As the Board of County Commissioners would not make, we'd be having the similar discussion as we're having right now. We wouldn't make anything until September. Do we need to have that meeting before the board takes it up in 2 weeks? I mean,
Well, I guess the question is, what is the BOCC going to be, what are they going to be working from? Is it something that's coming from the TDC and their workshops, or is it just all the requests they're hearing? Or are they going to have, I mean, I know Amber said that she's put together in pencil the budget. I don't know if it looks anything like what we've been discussing for the last 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
it looks like I got north-south heading on.
Yes.
You know,
A lot of work's been done.
Yeah. Amber, does it look anything like what we've been discussing?
It does, minus the things that we've talked about here.
Yep.
As well as we have of course, the 3% versus cost plan. That's the other big piece,
Okay.
so.
I mean, it's,
But I guess to answer your question, officially, we don't have to, because they're not, BOCC's not they're not having their workshop, I mean, their hearings until
I
September.
mean, we could take a straw vote now and say that we
We're all in
in
this
concept approve what would be presented, and that we support something like this. I think if the board differed from what's being presented or had some other thing they wanted to talk about, I think that was probably something we would want to come together and vote on. If not, then we could probably just adopt it at a later meeting based on the fact that the BOCC seems to be agreeing with our proposal.
Yeah. I mean, what's the?
I mean, I'm here most days
Yeah.
anyway, so for me to come downstairs and push a button,
I know,
it doesn't.
I could be, I'm open next week, I could come in for,
I think, whatever's gonna make it easy.
Okay.
Tish, are you
So-
available next week if we scheduled a meeting?
I'm not here on Tuesday, but I mean, if they can
But,
zoom in
I
or
mean, we
something.
could schedule it anytime next week, except I'm not here on Friday, so
I get back in Wednesday, so I'm available Thursday, Friday, next week, but.
Thursday, available Thursday?
So I would say that we,
You are? You're good Thursday?
so we have a committee of the whole meeting here that morning. Depending on how much time we thought we could do it before or after or something like that.
time's your committee on the whole meeting with public? Do y'all have a public forum before that?
No, I've got a shade meeting tentatively scheduled at 8:30, but
Anybody here want to do an 8 o'clock meeting? Yeah, I don't know how long, I mean, because we have members that aren't here and they may have some questions, but, so I don't want to rehash the whole meeting, but
I mean, I would
It'll be an
expect us to
official
be
meeting.
done by noon if we wanted to be here at noon.
so that's the only thing I have on my calendar is a noon meeting,
Okay.
but I can be here at 1.
I know I have something at 1 that I've already had to move once. So,
3 o'clock?
let's do, 3 o'clock's our normal time.
Yeah, okay. Everybody's good with 3 o'clock?
Okay. So Tina, if we can advertise 3 o'clock on July 15th?
It'll be a special meeting to recommend the TDT budget. It'll just be the one line item.
And I do have an excerpt for African Americans' request for increase, if anybody would be interested in it.
I would.
I would.
So it says, for the duration of the time we have received funding, it has been in the amount of $30,000. We have not had an adjustment for inflation, cost of living, nor the fact that we are providing significantly more programs and events annually than ever before. We are driving cultural tourism to Pensacola by virtue of our contact annually with past tourists who have visited and attended our museum and programs, inviting them to return the next year and giving them advance notice of programs and events. We now have 2 locations that require coverage due to our exhibits location at Voices of Pensacola. The past funding is inadequate to meet the needs of the additional essential staff and resources which support the programs and events. The African American Heritage Society is an asset to the county for many reasons. Firstly, our organization is the most senior African American cultural tourism vehicle in the Northwest Florida region and is a significant driver of cultural tourism to the Northwest Florida region, and particularly to Escambia County. We believe that the exhibit we have curated, along with the programs and events that we present, are currently and will continue to be a major interest of tourists from other cities, states, and that's as far as I got. So, Amber, do you have a second page? And countries who have told us directly that they want a full I'll read that whole one. We believe that the exhibit we have curated, along with the programs and events that we present, are currently and will continue to be of major interest to tourists from other cities, states, and countries who have told us directly that they want a full experience when they visit a city, complete with a recognition of the diverse history, culture, and information on the persons who contributed to the area's landscape. We know that tourists look for us because our website and Google metrics give us that information, which supports what the tourists are telling us directly. We have had local Pensacola residents come to our exhibit this fiscal year because they were told to do so by friends and relatives in New York, Philadelphia, and other places. When we asked how did those out-of-towners know, we were told that our exhibits and programs are trending on social media sites before, during, and after we present them. So that's the...
Okay. Well, we've got them in our straw voted proposal of 50,000. So, okay, so shall we take a straw vote now, so that when we come back, or we just come back next Thursday and somebody makes a motion and we take action?
I got another question. I think from Darren's ask, with the additional money that we have, wasn't there some talk about having a savings reserve put together and using it for marketing purposes?
So I think that'd be brought coming forward. I think this 1.4, or what did you say, 1.3, that's being collected from the 5th cent right now, that it is tentatively allocated to the unified budget or to visit, they would be coming back to my board to ask that be put in a reserve to be spent for future years or something. Is that?
I was looking at the carryover from this fiscal year, the 4 million, trying to sink some of those dollars into the market reserve account.
Okay. So I think,
Yeah, I mean, ongoing, I think that, you know, we'd be happy. Will you come up to the microphone, please? Are we being broadcast? I don't even know.
yes, I've seen David
Okay, so,
go.
yeah,
I
so
believe we are, but.
My apologies. So yes, originally, our request is that the $4 million that's unbudgeted from this year, collected in excess of what was budgeted, portion of that would be used to establish something we haven't had before, which is a emergency marketing reserve. So the next time we find ourselves in a situation like we did in 2020, we'd be better prepared to work through that.
Okay. So the 1.5 that I was saying was coming from supplemental is, if our numbers are accurate here, we would essentially have 2 million left over from supplemental from this year that could be put towards reserves, plus this 1.4, or is what's listed here, but 1.3, whatever it is what I would like to support that would continue to go towards a reserve that visit would have some control over. And I think I would probably have to talk to the clerk about that. But I would definitely advocate it with our board that be done, or if it needs to have a special line item on our side, but with the intent that it be a marketing reserve.
Okay.
That's my only thing. If it's going to be a reserve, I just would like to make sure that this board discuss or approves it as a marketing reserve and is not just a reserve that's later not used properly for TDT, benefits.
And I've been asking some of my peer from the counties adjacent to us and other places in Florida for some information about their reserves and how they set that aside, because I think it's prudent that a request to use those funds down the road would come through TDC, recommendation that was forwarded up to the Board of County Commissioners for approval, and if it's a supermajority vote of 4 out of 5 commissioners, that makes everyone feel better about setting money aside for a specific use, and then it's used that way down the road. We're good with that.
I think as I said, the things that I felt that the desk audit showed was that the funds that Escambia County had spent had come in front of this board first for approval, which I would like to see continue happen. I don't, in terms of the supermajority and things like that,
One possible option.
yeah, I think it would be something we could discuss, but I don't know how the rest of my board would take that.
I don't either. I would, yeah, I mean,
So I guess the question is, what happens if we don't agree to put these funds in a marketing reserve that are in excess? Where do those funds go, or how are they used?
I know historically they've been going into Fund 108, and it's grown, that pot has grown, but they keep being used for different things. As an example, which came to us, but the Beach Access 4 in Perdido Key and the Bob Sykes Bridge repair, $681,000. of TDT that went to that, 228 that went to beach access. So those are funds that are available in that are unrestricted in a reserve fund. They're not restricted in reserve, they're just unrestricted. So the BOCC can bring up an issue. If there's no restriction on it, then whatever, as long as it meets the statute for tourist development and the spending, then they can allocate it to whatever those projects are.
I think that, I think a good practice moving forward is that we look at setting aside, you know, if, as I mentioned, Amber, I don't want to get into an argument or a debate on what we expect to have as our expected collections each year. But I think if, you know, that supplemental, if you can set a lot of that aside as a reserve, I think that's probably a good practice. Because you've essentially, you know, I don't think it's a good practice for Visit to be, and I know I just offered it, but for Visit to be budgeting their budget based on receiving supplemental. And then, but just knowing that if that reserves are there, that if something comes up, let's say like at Jackie James, that, and maybe that's not a great example, but just something, other thing that was worthwhile, we know we'd have those reserves available, that that Visit knows what their budget is for the year, and that's there. And that's what I'd like to see moving forward.
I think in the conversations I've had with Darren, the desire to have that marketing fund reserve is so that when we get into the situations like we found ourselves last year, where we quit collecting TDT, or where we found ourselves in 2010, whatever year it was, we had an oil spill and we quit collecting tourist development tax, that we can continue to market the area, obviously, without having to make the major cuts that the unified budget had to make last year.
And
I mean, almost 100% of that cut came from the unified budget. The reserve that was held back vanished because we didn't collect and it went away.
Yeah, but I mean, that 1.3, I mean, that 1.3 that we didn't hold on to either, I mean, it's, I mean, looking at the difference was that you had, it looks like Visit took like a $1.5 million cut out of you know, $3 million, you know, I mean, it,
Right.
I'm not here to
Also,
argue
ACE
that.
had an $800,000 cut.
Right, and that's because
Right.
you guys
And
didn't do anything,
Pensacola
you know.
Sports had a couple $100,000
Right.
cut.
So,
So it ended up being about $2.5 million from the unified budget that was cut.
but they also had some other funds that were reallocated that came in. So, neither here nor there. But no, I think, but overall, the reserve account would grow, and that would give us an opportunity not to have to do that. Just like we took the 500,000 and gave it to them, we would have more of that available, and I think that would be good. So as hopefully collections continue to grow, their budget continues to grow, I think we look at just some other things, but I think that we're in a good place right now.
I just have one question. So when we put it into reserves, or, you know, for future, can it be specified it has to be for marketing? Or is it just open reserves that it can be used for anything? And I guess it's because they got hit so hard
Sure.
with staffing and so forth. That's what I think that we were trying to get to.
And I've shared with Darren, I would be very supportive of what he's trying to bring forward, carry forward from this year, that be created in a marketing one. I think also to continue to just build our general reserves, with that remaining $2 million would be a good place for that. So it's we both come up. But it's knowing that our board should come here before we just spend.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, aren't you saying 65% of that excess is what you're saying we put into a marketing reserve fund? And that,
Yeah, those comments are based on historically how we've been investing in the TDT. So even if you took, I don't have my notes in front of me right now, but even if you took 1.5 and moved it forward into next year, set the 35% aside into the general fund, you'd still have a good chunk of money to start that marketing reserve and still be putting money aside in the general fund to grow that as well. Because I think it's 1.4, 35% is like 1.4 million of that 4 million.
That's probably about right,
Yeah. So,
in my head.
I mean, listen, I want to, honestly, I want to be supportive of you guys also spending money wisely, that if, there comes a point where you don't spend all of it, that we could try to put that into a marketing reserve as well.
And I agree that at the end of the year, if, it makes better sense to put that money in a reserve, there's not an opportunity. I agree, that's a great way to roll those dollars.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
does our board need to make that recommendation?
I think it's something we would take up in that special meeting if that's what we.
Well, we need to add that to the agenda or we can't take it up. I mean, if that's what everybody wants to do, we'll add that. Tina, could you add that to the agenda also to discuss reserve funds? So just a quick question for Mike. We started the year with, and Amber would have this answer also, but didn't we start either one of you, since you're up now. We started the year with about $5.2 million in the Fund 108.
That sounds about right.
And
I can go grab my notes real quick.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. So if we started around 5.2 million, or it could have been 5.8, I can't remember where we started this fiscal year. And we're collecting more than we budgeted. That's obviously, that pot has grown, and we're talking about reallocating 1.5, into like fund balance into next year, into proposing it for next year, and then we're talking about doing something with the rest of those funds. Do we talk about something reserving a portion of those, that Fund 108 balance that existed at the beginning of the year? Do we discuss that next week also, not just what's collected over and above what's expended? I know we use it for cash flow. I knew you were coming up for that. For cash flow needs, because there's $2 million that's forwarded to Visit Pensacola at the beginning of the year, and then, stuff's reimbursed, but.
As I say, I actually don't have it on me. I can run to my office and grab it.
No.
Okay.
That's fine. I know it's estimated somewhere around there.
It's right around there.
Right. We would need to take a deeper look at the details before we talked about what we're going to utilize it for,
Right.
just to make sure we're not pinching ourselves.
Right.
So
So can you do that before our meeting next Thursday?
next Thursday, we can take a look at it.
If you have time? That would be awesome. And then, just a quick other question, speaking of reserves, was the $350,000 that went to the Bay Center, that was going to be reimbursed by CARES Act or ARPA funds, I guess it was, did that happen?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so those funds are back into the Fund 108.
Yes, sir.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we have, any other discussion or questions? If not, that was a quick 3-hour meeting. Appreciate everybody's patience and endurance.
The last I looked down, it was like 5:18. Also, when I looked back down, it's like 5:50.
Well, thank you, everyone. If there's no other business, appreciate the audience sticking with us and members of the council. Thank you. We're adjourned.